Deep within the forests of Europe lies the remnants of an extraordinary and chilling chapter of history. A bizarre Nazi experiment so audacious and sinister that its full story is only now being unearthed. It was a plan driven by a twisted ambition to turn back time and recreate a prehistoric world that had not existed for thousands of years. Scientists under the SS sought to bring back extinct animals that would serve as game for a Nazi super race to hunt in vast, ancient forests across Europe. This master plan wasn't just an obsession with nature. It was intertwined with the regime's broader and deadly ideology. The Nazis were prepared to do whatever it took, including mass atrocities, to reshape both humanity and nature in their image. The brutal campaign to clear forests and villages was part of their broader strategy, which they referred to as the final solution. In July 1941, Police Battalion 322, infamous for its atrocities, began a horrific operation in the Białowieża forest in eastern Poland. Thousands of villagers were hunted down, forcibly removed, or executed. Those who resisted were shot on the spot. The war diary of Battalion 322, meticulously preserved, provides a haunting and candid record of these events. Between July 25th and August 1st, 1941, the battalion burned 34 villages and expelled over 7,000 people. One photograph from this time captures the destruction. Houses ablaze, entire villages reduced to smoldering ruins. In the village of Buja, nearly 1,000 residents were deported, and those who couldn't move quickly enough were executed. This brutal clearing of the forest wasn't merely a wartime operation. It was part of a larger Nazi project spearheaded by Hermann Göring, one of the Third Reich's most powerful figures. Göring envisioned the forest as a private nature reserve where his distorted dreams of a prehistoric paradise could be realized. The events in these forests are a chilling reminder of the lengths the Nazis would go to impose their ideology, blending environmental manipulation with genocidal brutality. Deep in the heart of Eastern Europe, the Białowieża forest holds a dark and haunting legacy. Revered as one of Europe's last primeval wildernesses, stretching over 1,500 square kilometers, it was more than just a forest to the Nazis. It was a symbol of their twisted vision of racial purity and Aryan supremacy. Among the ancient trees roamed rare species like wolves, the Eurasian lynx, European moose, and the majestic European bison, known as the wisant. These animals, once hunted by ancient Aryan ancestors, embodied the mythology the Nazis sought to reclaim as they attempted to reshape both humanity and nature. Hermann Göring, Hitler's second-in-command and Germany's master of the hunt, had long been captivated by this forest. Before the war, he had visited as a guest of the Polish government, but with the invasion of the Soviet Union, his ambitions became clear. Göring claimed the Białowieża forest for the Third Reich, envisioning it as a hunting reserve fit for his grotesque dreams of a primeval paradise, cleared of its undesirable human inhabitants and restocked with wild beasts. This vision, however, was not confined to romantic fantasies. Göring collaborated with zoologists like Dr. Lutz Heck, a prominent member of the SS, who had embarked on an audacious scientific mission years before the Nazis came to power. Together with his brother Heinz, Heck sought to resurrect extinct species, including the aurochs, the wild, powerful ancestor of modern cattle that had vanished centuries earlier. Inspired by ancient myths and figures like the legendary warrior Siegfried, who was said to have hunted great beasts, the Heck brothers saw the aurochs as the ultimate symbol of primal strength and ferocity. The aurochs, described by Julius Caesar as nearly the size of elephants, were extraordinary animals, towering over modern cattle with massive horns and robust frames. Archaeological evidence reveals their imposing stature. Males stood between 160 to 180 centimeters at the shoulder, dwarfing their domesticated descendants. The Heck brothers envisioned recreating these creatures through selective breeding, producing a fiercer, wilder beast that would roam the Nazi nature reserves and serve as the ultimate hunting challenge. The Białowieża forest became the testing ground for these grandiose and brutal ambitions. Photographs from the time show Göring and Nazi officials studying detailed models of the forest years before Poland was invaded. These images underscore the regime's calculated plans to seize and transform the forest into a living monument to their ideology. For Göring and his allies, this was more than a natural reserve. It was a sacred arena for their imagined Aryan revival. However, the cost of this dream was devastating. Villages within the forest were systematically cleared, their inhabitants forcibly removed or murdered. Battalion 322 of the Order Police meticulously recorded their atrocities, which included burning 34 villages and deporting over 7,000 people in just 1 week in 1941. The brutality extended to anyone who resisted, with survivors recounting horrific tales of destruction and loss. The Nazi obsession with controlling nature and creating a prehistoric utopia is a chilling testament to their broader ideology. It wasn't simply about reshaping the natural world. It was about reshaping history and humanity itself. The Bialowieza forest, with its rare beauty and ancient life, became both a battleground and a symbol of the horrific lengths the Nazis would go to realize their warped vision of the Third Reich. Before their extinction, the Heck brothers believed that domesticated cattle still carried the genetic blueprint of their formidable ancestors, the aurochs. They were convinced that, buried within every modern cow, lay the remnants of a wild and untamed past. This belief was rooted in the understanding that evolution preserves ancestral traits, meaning modern animals, and even humans, are living fossils of their ancient predecessors. The Heck brothers embarked on an ambitious mission to rewind time and resurrect the aurochs, an animal that disappeared around 9,000 years ago when humans first domesticated it. Their efforts were based on historical accounts, cave paintings from Spain depicting aurochs, and skeletal remains. They theorized that the key characteristics of the aurochs, its size, coloration, horn shape, and behavior, were distributed across various modern cattle breeds. Their task, as Lutz Heck described, was to unite these traits into a single animal through selective breeding, a process they referred to as backbreeding. In their quest, the Heck brothers scoured Europe for cattle with desirable traits. Lutz sourced wild bulls from Corsica, muscular cattle from the Camargue in southern France, Spanish fighting bulls, Hungarian breeds, and rugged Highland cattle from Scotland. Each breed contributed specific traits, such as horn shape, coat color, or untamed behavior. The process was painstaking, requiring generations of breeding to combine these elements into a cohesive form resembling the aurochs. This project resonated deeply with Nazi ideology, which sought to engineer a pure race, extending their ideas of racial superiority to animals. The regime, under Hitler's National Socialist Party, had already begun enforcing racial purity laws, often using terms like crossbreed to classify individuals of mixed heritage. These concepts, eerily similar to the language of animal breeding, found a natural ally in Lutz Heck, who was deeply aligned with Nazi beliefs about ethnic and genetic purity. The rise of the Nazi Party in 1933 presented an extraordinary opportunity for Heck. He became a member of the SS and developed a close relationship with Hermann Göring, Hitler's deputy and Reich master of the hunt. Göring, who styled himself as a modern-day Germanic knight and avid hunter, saw in Heck's project a way to revive the mythical beasts of Germany's past. Heck cultivated Göring's favor by supplying him with exotic animals, such as lion cubs, and organizing hunting trips that catered to Göring's romanticized vision of the wild. With Göring's patronage, Heck's breeding projects expanded significantly. The Reich Marshal provided funding to import moose and bison from North America, believing that the infusion of new blood would invigorate the hunting stock of Europe. This belief reflected Nazi disdain for domestication. Wild and aggressive animals were idealized as symbols of strength, while domestic animals were dismissed as degenerate. The Heck brothers also attempted to recreate other extinct animals, such as the tarpan, the wild and combative ancestor of the modern horse. These creatures, along with the aurochs, were designated as German beasts, emblematic of the Aryan race's supposed primal connection to the natural world. Ultimately, the Heck brothers' work wasn't just an exercise in genetic experimentation. It was a disturbing extension of Nazi ideology. Their efforts to resurrect prehistoric animals mirrored the regime's obsession with controlling nature and redefining purity, both human and animal, as they sought to forge a mythologized vision of their Third Reich. Hermann Göring, as the senior hunter of Germany, epitomized the Nazi ideal of strength, aggression, and independence, qualities that Lutz Heck sought to embody in his resurrected aurochs. Weak or feeble animals born into the breeding program were systematically culled, reflecting a chilling parallel to the Nazis' treatment of humans. The same brutal logic applied to the Nazi vision of society. Only the strong and racially pure were allowed to thrive, while those deemed unfit or impure were systematically eliminated. The Berlin Olympics of 1936 showcased this ideology. Celebrated as a triumph of Aryan athleticism, the Games displayed the ideal German physique and strength. Behind this spectacle, however, lay the grim reality of eugenics and genocide. Those considered unworthy, racial minorities, the mentally ill, and others were sterilized or murdered in a horrifying prelude to the Holocaust. Hitler's vision, as detailed in Mein Kampf, was explicit. Whoever is not bodily and spiritually healthy and worthy shall not have the right to pass on his suffering in the body of his children. This belief shaped not only Nazi policies toward people, but also their attempts to improve animals, linking the twisted ideology of racial purity to Heck's breeding experiments. Göring played a central role in both the animal breeding programs and the Nazi regime's atrocities. As a major supporter of Heck's work, he provided funding and resources, seeing the project as a way to revive the mythical beasts of Germany's past. At the same time, Göring's influence extended to the final solution. He signed the documents authorizing the systematic extermination of millions. By November 1937, Göring's ambitions for nature and ideology were on full display at a major international hunting exhibition in Berlin. A photograph from the event captures Göring and Heck studying a map of the Bialowieza forest with a gilded aurochs horn prominently displayed. This image suggests that even before the war began, Göring had his sights set on seizing the forest and transforming it into a Nazi utopia, a haven for Heck's recreated beasts and a symbol of Aryan dominance. In 1938, Heck's project reached a critical milestone. While the animals he bred resembled their ancient ancestors, they remained dependent on humans for survival. To prove their ability to live independently in the wild, Heck transported his cattle 780 kilometers to Göring's hunting estate in eastern Germany. Once released, the animals were described by Heck as a triumph. The energy of our first wild cattle in the German forest and their innate beauty and strength aroused such enthusiasm that they were very soon left free to roam. However, local accounts paint a different picture. Far from being harmonious additions to the ecosystem, the cattle became aggressive and dangerous, attacking passersby and even damaging bicycles. Worse, they disrupted deer feeding grounds, angering Göring and other hunters. Despite these issues, the experiment persisted, highlighting the Nazis' obsession with control over both nature and society. As the war broke out in 1939, new opportunities arose for Heck. With German forces occupying large parts of Europe, he gained access to animals from zoos in conquered territories. One notable episode occurred at the Warsaw Zoo, where Heck arrived soon after the German occupation. Jan and Antonina Zabinski, the zoo's directors, were forced to host him as he commandeered animals for his breeding experiments. Heck's position as both a prominent Nazi and a zoologist gave him unchecked authority to loot and repurpose resources for his twisted vision. The story of Heck's breeding programs and Göring's obsession with primeval forests and mythical beasts is a chilling reminder of how deeply Nazi ideology infiltrated every aspect of life. From human atrocities to the manipulation of nature, their relentless pursuit of dominance knew no bounds, leaving a legacy of destruction in both the natural world and human history. The visit of Dr. Lutz Heck to the Warsaw Zoo in 1939 was a harrowing experience for Jan and Antonina Zabinski, the zoo's directors. Heck arrived with an official decree. The zoo would be liquidated. Precious and exotic animals were to be sent to German zoos, while the remaining animals would be killed. This grim order left the Zabinskis devastated, particularly Antonina, who later recorded her deep dismay at the loss of their beloved animals. Despite their inability to protect the creatures from Heck's ruthless breeding programs, the couple undertook a courageous act of resistance. They hid Jewish families in the basement of their home, just beneath the feet of the visiting Nazi officer. Antonina's skill as a pianist became a lifeline for those in hiding. She used her music to signal danger, playing specific melodies to warn of an imminent threat. It was a quiet, yet ingenious act of defiance, providing those in the basement with a chance to hide or escape when necessary. Meanwhile, the events in the Bialowieza forest were becoming an ominous reflection of the Nazis' broader goals. On June 22, 1941, the German invasion of the Soviet Union brought vast new territories under their control, including the forest, which had been occupied by the Soviets since 1939. This massive expanse of flat plains, forests, and swamps presented an ideal canvas for the Nazi plan to Germanize the East, not just through colonization by German settlers, but by reshaping the landscape itself. Dr. Lutz Heck was at the forefront of this vision, claiming that the land had been degraded by its previous inhabitants. His solution was to restore the region to its original German state by introducing German wildlife, trees, and forests. The Bialowieza forest, situated on the far eastern border of Poland and now annexed into the Reich, became the centerpiece of this twisted ecological project. Plans were drawn up to create a vast interconnected forest system stretching to the coast, a massive German primal forest. This idyllic vision, however, came with a dark prerequisite: the complete removal of the existing human population. For Nazi leaders like Hermann Göring and Heinrich Himmler, this meant the expulsion or extermination of over 20,000 people who lived in the forest. Within days of the German invasion, Himmler's SS execution squads, under Göring's direction, began the process of ethnic cleansing. Villages were cleared, and Jewish communities that had lived in the region since the 18th century were eradicated. Evidence from war diaries reveals that the Bialowieza forest became one of the first sites of mass executions during the Holocaust. Jewish cemeteries stand as the only remnants of these once thriving communities, which were either slaughtered in the forest or sent to extermination camps. The non-Jewish population fared no better, with thousands forcibly expelled to create a barren wilderness. The forest was to be transformed into a hunting paradise, free of human interference except for the German elite. Göring envisioned a return to the mythical past, with German hunters reliving the supposed glory of their Aryan ancestors, chasing aurochs with spears, as described in Julius Caesar's writings. This obsession with myth and the glorification of an imagined Aryan origin drove the Nazis to turn these fantasies into a horrifying reality. The Nazi project in the Bialowieza forest was emblematic of their ideology. Myth became a tool to legitimize violence, as the regime sought to recreate an idealized version of the past, even at the cost of human suffering and destruction. The forest became a stage for the Nazis' deadly fusion of pseudoscience, mythology, and barbarity, a stark reminder of the lengths they would go to impose their vision of a pure world. As the Nazi delusion reached its peak, the Bialowieza forest in eastern Poland became the epicenter of their grim experiment in reshaping both nature and humanity. Amid the deportations and executions that left tens of thousands of people suffering, Dr. Lutz Heck arrived in the forest to oversee the culmination of his decades-long breeding experiment. His genetically engineered aurochs were transported from Göring's hunting reserve, where they had caused havoc, and released into the ethnically cleansed forest. For Heck, this was his crowning moment of glory, a surreal achievement recorded in his memoirs with apparent oblivion to the horrors surrounding him. Every year now, the cows of the breed bring new calves into the world. Thus, the new breed flourishes and grows. The Bialowieza forest was transformed into a sprawling wildlife laboratory for Heck's ambitious projects. Alongside his aurochs, he introduced bison, bears, and experimental breeds of wild horses. However, the same forest that served as a sanctuary for these animals also became a battleground. Heinrich Himmler and Hermann Göring ensured that the human cost of their vision was paid in blood. Himmler's SS and Göring's favored hunting squads conducted relentless clearing operations, hunting down partisans and Jews who had sought refuge in the dense woods. War diaries reveal that these hunts were treated as sport, with victims slaughtered like game and their bodies left as warnings. The atrocities didn't end with the massacres. Alcohol was provided to soldiers after their killing sprees, numbing their reluctance and fostering a culture of camaraderie through shared brutality. Some soldiers later claimed that they were simply clearing the forest for a nature reserve when tried for war crimes. Yet the forest, though stripped of much of its population, remained a source of resistance. Partisans continued to fight a guerrilla war under its cover, preventing the Nazis from ever fully controlling the area. As the tide of the war turned, the Nazi vision for the forest unraveled. Soviet forces pushed the Germans into retreat, and Heck's breeding facilities in Berlin Zoo were destroyed in bombings. Many of his animals, including the aurochs, disappeared, likely consumed by starving Berliners or Soviet soldiers. What became of the aurochs released into Białowieża remains uncertain. Some accounts suggest they survived briefly after the war, only to vanish as remnants of a failed Nazi legacy. Others believe they were slaughtered, considered symbols of the oppressive regime. In the aftermath, Hermann Göring committed suicide after being captured by American forces in 1945. Lutz Heck was investigated for his role as a prominent Nazi official, but was ultimately exonerated, continuing his career as a zoologist until his death in the 1980s. Despite its dark history, the Białowieża forest endures as a shared nature reserve between Poland and Belarus. It remains a haven for rare wildlife, including European bison, and serves as a reminder of both nature's resilience and humanity's capacity for destruction. The Heck brothers' cattle, now referred to as Heck cattle, persist as an eerie legacy. While they bear a superficial resemblance to the ancient aurochs, scientists agree they are genetically no closer to their ancestors than any other breed of domestic cattle. These animals, created through selective breeding and Nazi ideology, stand as symbols of the regime's flawed attempts to manipulate life itself. Some call them Hitler's cows, a label that highlights their origins in one of history's darkest chapters. The Nazi obsession with mythical purity, whether in humans or animals, failed utterly. Their projects to reshape nature, rooted in romanticized myths and pseudoscience, collapsed under the weight of their brutality and delusion. Today, advancements in genetics offer the possibility of cloning true aurochs using ancient DNA, potentially bringing Julius Caesar's vision of these mighty beasts to life once again. However, the history of the Heck brothers' experiments remains a cautionary tale, reminding us of the devastating consequences when science and ideology are twisted together.